Hey everybody, this is Bob, the guy that does all the pre-trip videos. I wanted to show you something that I have as an opportunity for you because as a pre-trip instructor, I found several students that were struggling in different areas of performing the task of performing a pre-trip for the CDL test. And as a result, what I've done was put together some documentation along with these videos that I handed out to those students that were in the school. And I have these now available to you for the sum of $2 each. I've minimized the price just to make it affordable to you because I know a lot of people are struggling as they're trying to get their CDL and get out there and start making money as a truck driver. So what I've done was I'm going to give you an example of everything that I put together so far. This right here is a step-by-step document, text document for performing pre-trip. And when you're going through the schooling, you're going to be taught how to say it. You know, whatever the component is you're pointing at, it's properly mounted, secure, not cracked, bent, broken, or damaged. You know, all the hoses, there's no abrasions, bulges, cuts, dry rot, and frays. All that is incorporated into this document, and it goes from front to back, including the end cab and the air brake test. Okay, so that's the document. I also have a pictures file, and the pictures file shows every single component on the truck that goes all the way from the front bumper to the back DOT bumper and everything in between. And every component has a description with an arrow pointing at the description, whether you're talking about the water pump, on and on and on, all the way through the entire truck. Okay, so every single component I've got pictures of on the truck. So if visual learning is your ticket, this might help. Okay, I also have the air brake test. The air brake test is broken down into a step-by-step kind of a pictorial thing that describes every single step of the air brake test, going all the way through the 4 steps. And again, this has been a lifesaver for a lot of people that I've been working with going through the CDL program. I also put together some documentation for the backing maneuvers. Even though the videos only show pre-trip, what I've done was I put together a straight line. I've got offset left and offset right. I've got blind side and sight side parallel. And most importantly, the one that students seem to struggle with the most is alley dock. Alley dock to me is one of the easiest, but again, a lot of the people struggle with that. And even though you're getting hands-on training while you're going through the schooling system, this document will show you my tricks in being able to perform the maneuver. I've got a couple other documents on there, but one more document that I threw on there is the logs. If and when your Qualcomm or your tablet or whatever you want to call it, your your computer that's in your truck craps out, you got to resort to paper logs, right? If you haven't learned that yet, you will when you're going through schooling. You have to have logs in order to stay in compliance with the FMCSA folks, the DOT guys. So if you're struggling at all with trying to grasp the process of manual log entries and also recap, I threw in my way of doing a recap. So that document's right here. And it's pretty detailed as far as how I do recap. It's real easy really in the end when you get to it. But this document shows it all. Again, I'm selling each one of these documents for $2 each. If you're interested, all you have to do is shoot me an email, tell me what you want, send the funds, the $2 or how, $10 for the package or whatever, send it to either my PayPal account or my Venmo account. And again, I'll have those listed at the end of each video. I bid you well, good luck in your CDL test, and if you need any of these documents, let me know. Talk to you later. Bye. So you can watch the whole entire truck in motion as far as the Section D. I'm still going to break it up, but remember that everything on this rig I'm going to start out by saying the same 3 acronyms over and over and over. So every single thing that I'm going to be calling out, you're going to hear at least the same 3 acronyms, okay? Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Some of the things that I'm going to be pointing out, when I'm doing my end cap, for example, and I'm calling out my windshield, I'm saying the same thing. So some of this stuff's not going to make sense. My windshield's properly mounted and secure. It's not cracked, bent, or broken. It's not missing any hardware. What? Windows don't bend. It's either broke or it's not, right? What I'm doing is getting you all in the flow, saying the same thing over and over and over. You can say too much and get away with it and get the points versus not saying enough and taking a chance of getting hit or overthinking it. Let's say my windshield's not broke, it's not cracked, but I don't want to say it's not. You're thinking too hard into it. You get the same flow going, you can get away with it by saying the same stuff over and over and over, okay? If there's anything that's rubber on here that I'm calling out, there's another acronym I have to say. A, B, C, D, F. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, okay? We all good? Very first thing I'm doing for Section A. Now, let's assume that on test day I got Section D. I'm doing the whole truck. I'm going to break it up in sections, but when we get done talking about the coupling, I'm going to kind of revert back to the start of Section B, and I'm going to run right through after I get done with Section A. It'll make sense as I go through it. Okay. Very first thing on Section A is what's called the approach. I'm walking up to the truck, and I'm looking underneath the engine compartment to make sure it's free of any leaks or puddles. And now I'm going to go from the top down. Those are my clearance lights. My clearance lights are amber in color and clean. This is where the acronyms start. They're properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My low beams and high beams are clear in color and clean, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. This little light bulb right here, remember these 3 words. Marker, signal, flasher. It's my marker light, it's the right side of my turn signal, and it's the right side of my emergency flashers. Easier to say marker, signal, flasher. There's a couple other places on the rig. I'm going to challenge you with the same call out, okay? My marker, signal, flasher, and my reflector are both amber in color and clean. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Now we pop the hood. On the passenger side of the truck, or the unique side, as the paperwork calls it. On the unique side of the truck, or passenger side, you have a couple of what I call primary components and subcomponents to those primary components that you have to call out. One of the primary components are all my hoses. Now, when you call out all your hoses, take your hand and sweep around like this. Don't try to individually point them out. Just take your hand and say, all my hoses. That way the inspector knows you're calling out all your hoses, okay? Now, they're rubber, right? So I'm going to start off with the same three acronyms for everything. Then I'm going to add the A, B, C, D, F, because they're rubber. And they're round, so I'm going to say they're not leaking. Anything that's round, you want to say, and it's not leaking, because there's something running through it. Whether it's fluid or some air, or there's something pumping through it. So you want to say, and it's not leaking, okay? Subcomponent to my hoses are my hose clamps. I'm just tapping out every clamp that I see. Now they're just solid pieces of metal, so 3 acronyms, okay? The other primary component is down here. Remember, it's not up here. It's down here. It's your alternator. Now the alternator is just a solid piece of metal with electronic components in it that charges your batteries, right? 3 acronyms. The subcomponents to your alternator is belt driven. Your belt is up here in the front. And can you pull that back a little bit? I mean, just so they can see?
Yeah.
Okay, the alternator is belt driven, which is right up here in the front. Alright, and it's rubber, right? So I'm going to say the 3 acronyms. I'm going to say the A, B, C, D, F. and then I'm going to pull on it and make sure there's no more than 3/4 of an inch of play in the belt. On the back end of your alternator, you have 2 electric cables. These 2 electric cables run over to the battery compartment and charge your batteries, right? And there's a couple of additional words you have to say when you get to the electric cables. I'm going to say the first 3 acronyms like everything else. I'm going to say the A, B, C, D, F acronym because they're rubber insulated. But first and foremost, you don't want to say they're not leaking because you have copper cables in there. So instead of that, what you need to say is there's no illegal tape, there's no splices, and the insulation is not brittle or cracked. Everybody understand what those words mean in relation to those cables? Okay. What I'm talking about here is, let's say where my 2 fingers meet, I have a break in my insulation. I didn't take this thing to a mechanic, and the mechanic took a bunch of electrical tape, wrapped it around there to hide it. There's no illegal tape. I don't have a busted wire that somebody took and made a splice out of it. You ever take an old cable that's all brittle and rotten and you bend it and the insulation just kind of explodes on you? It's not brittle or cracked. Make sense? Okay. Any questions before I start? Okay. Here we go. You guys can back up just a little bit so they can all see what I'm doing. All right, here we go. All my hoses are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and they're not leaking. Hose clamps, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My alternator is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My alternator is belt driven. My belt is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and when pulling on it, I had no more than 3/4 of an inch of play in the belt. My 2 electric cables are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays. There's no illegal tape. There's no splices, and the insulation is not brittle or cracked. Everybody good? Any questions over here? Now we go to the fun side, driver's side. This is where all the stuff is. Okay, now on the driver's side, the way that I do the driver's side, if you were to follow me in the list of components on Section A on the inspector's version of the paperwork, you would see that I bounce around a little bit.
Yeah, I just wanted to do it.
The reason I bounce around according to that list as the inspector listed it is because the way I do what I do, I don't want to miss anything. So what I do is I start at the top left and I go from left to right. Drop down a level, get all this, drop down, get all this, drop down, get all this, kind of a zigzag motion. I get all the stuff in the middle, then I work my way out, okay? This right here is my coolant fluid reservoir. Now it's got a bunch of fluid in it, right? So I want to make sure when I say it's not leaking. And it's got a minimum and a maximum level of fluids, just like your car, okay? And I'm going to check the cap. This right here is your power steering fluid reservoir. I'm going to call this out exactly the same way that I call out my coolant reservoir. Exact call out, okay? Now, I'm at my coolant reservoir. I go back. There's nothing at all on the engine block you have to call out. You also don't have to call out your fuel filter, and you don't have to call out your air dryer filter, okay? These 3 things you don't have to say anything about, all right? Now, I'm at my coolant reservoir. I go back. There's nothing at all on the block. I'm going to drop down. I'm right here, so that's my hoses. When I call out my hoses, I'm going to do the same thing I did over there. I'm going to take my hand, I'm going to say all my hoses, and I'm going to stop on this stack of hoses coming out of my cab, this multicolored stack. That way the inspector acknowledges I'm talking about those hoses as part of all my hoses. But even though I'm saying all my hoses, when I get down to these hoses, I'm going to call these hoses out, and then finally when I get down to this hose, I'm going to call out my brake hose. Notice I said these hoses. You only see one. There's actually 3 hoses. This is my power steering fluid hoses, okay? On the bottom of my plastic container here, I have a nipple that the other hose hooks up to, and it runs back and along the frame. This right here is the hose that runs along the frame, and it kind of disappears into darkness. Where it disappears to is behind the frame of the engine. I'm pointing that out because you have another hose coming out from behind the frame of the engine that feeds into this device right here. Now going back to behind the frame of the engine, you have this hose is one of my power steering hoses. You have this hose right here running along the frame, and then coming out from back behind the frame, you have the third hose. Now there's 2 components that are back behind the frame of the engine that you cannot see. You can't see them, but you have to call them out, okay? One is my power steering pump, and the other one is my air compressor. Now they're back behind the frame of the engine, so there's no way to throw a belt on them, right? So it's gear driven. They're both gear driven, okay? And they're both not leaking. They're both not leaking because these 2 hoses are feeding fluid to and from the power steering pump, and the air compressor's pumping a bunch of air, right? So that's why they're not leaking. Okay, so let's go back to the hoses. I'm getting my hoses, I'm saying all my hoses, and I stop here. Now the next thing I'm going to get, I'm at this level, is my hose clamps. Same thing, I'm just pointing out whatever clamps I can see. Okay, once I call out my hoses and hose clamps, I drop down a level. I'm right in here. That's my water pump. Now my water pump's got that fluid pumping through it, right? So I want to make sure say it's not leaking. And my water pump is belt driven. My belt is way up here in the front. It's a different belt than the other belt. But I'm going to call that out exactly the same way that I did the other one. I'm going to reach in there and tug on it a little bit and make sure there's no more than 3/4 of an inch of play in the belt. Okay? So I'm at the water pump. I get that done. I keep going back. My dipstick. Now my dipstick, this is where I tell you that when I'm calling this out and telling them what I'm going to do, I'm not actually doing this. The only thing I'm really getting my hands on and tugging on is those belts, okay? In other words, my dipstick's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. I pull it out, wipe it off, stick it back in, pull it out, and make sure it's between the minimum and maximum level of oil. I'm not doing any of it. I'm just telling them what I would do. What you're doing is you're telling the inspector, once I get my CDL and I'm out there rolling, this is how I'm going to do a pre-trip. Same thing with the valve stem. I'm going to take a tire gauge and hook it up. I'm not really doing it. I'm just telling them what I would do. Make sense? Okay, so I'm at this level. I get my dipstick. I drop down. I'm right in here. My hand goes on here. This is my own personal reference to remember that there's not 1 but 3 hoses I got to call out with my power steering hoses. And it also reminds me about those 2 hidden components behind the frame of the engine. Okay? Once I get down into this section, I'm going to start talking in terms of systems. What components make up a system? The reason I'm doing that when we're talking about the brake system, once I get done and I get out here to the middle of my tire, on test day you're going to be like this. So I'm planting the seed in your mind of what components make up a system so that once you get out here, you know you're done in there. You called out everything, you didn't miss anything. Okay?
Can you mention the hoses again? The 3 hoses?
I've got this hose right here. This hose right back here. See it?
Yeah.
And then this hose coming out from back behind the frame of the engine.
Do you have to name them?
Yep, they're my power steering hoses. Okay. These are all power steering hoses. This one feeds to and from the power steering pump. And this one feeds right into your gearbox. Alright? Any questions before I start? Here we go. My coolant reservoir is properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware. It's between the minimum and the maximum level of fluid. It's not leaking. And the cap's on tight. I go back from here, nothing on the block, I'm dropping down. All my hoses are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and they're not leaking. My hose clamps, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Drop down. My water pump is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. My water pump is belt driven. My belt is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and when pulling on it, I had no more than 3/4 of an inch of play in the belt. My dipstick is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. I'd pull it out, wipe it off, stick it back in, pull it out, and make sure that I'm between the minimum and the maximum level of oil. I'm at my dipstick, dropping down, starting to get close to those two hidden components. Hand goes on here. But I'm getting this done first because there's nothing in front of here at this level I got to hit. My power steering fluid reservoir is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. It's between the minimum and the maximum level of fluid, and the cap's on tight. Okay? My power steering fluid hoses are all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and they're not leaking. My power steering hose clamps, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Down behind the frame of my engine, as long as you take your pointer and you stick it down there into the darkness where those hoses run to, you're good. Down behind the frame of my engine, I have a power steering pump and an air compressor. They're both gear driven. They're both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and they're not leaking. Okay? Now I'm right at the frame level, right? I'm dropping down, I'm right in here. This right here is my power steering gearbox. Okay? Now it's got these hoses feeding from it, or from and to it, right? So I want to make sure I say it's not leaking. My power steering gearbox is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. Now, I'm going to switch places with you, sir.
Okay.
The next couple of components that I'm going to be calling out, I'm going to burn your ears out with acronyms, and I'm going to show you how I do it in test mode. It's all part of your steering linkage. Now, you're going to have to come in one by one to see this once I point them out, but I'm going to call them out individually, and I'm going to show you how I do it in test mode. Yeah, if you don't mind. Okay, the very first thing that everyone should be able to see, this right here is my pitman arm. My pitman arm. Okay, my pitman arm is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Go ahead. My pitman arm is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. This right here is my drag link. My drag link is properly mounted and secured. Whoops, sorry. My drag link is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. This right here is my upper control arm. My upper control arm. Okay, you guys in the back need to come up to see this. Go for it. So after you see it, make way for the other people that haven't seen it. See it? My upper control arm is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. It's my upper control arm. Okay? My lower control arm, you're going to have to get in probably one by one to see this one. My lower control arm kind of looks like the upper control arm, only it's down a little bit lower. My lower control arm is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. The next component I'm going to show you is my tie rod. Big old rod that ties the steering assemblies together. Goes from end to end. All see it? Tie rod. Good. Tie rod. My tie rod is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Now on each one of these connection points between my pitman arm and my drag link, the other end of my drag link and my upper control arm, and then my lower control arm and my tie rod, all 3 points, all 3 connection points, you have a nut that's spun on the bolt. So if I was to take one of those bolts and turn it sideways, the nut's spun on the bolt. And the front of the nut looks like one of those old European castles, called a castle nut. If I was looking at that bolt again from the side, I've got a hole drilled through that bolt, and I've got a cotter pin that's stuck through it and fanned out. Okay, so from my pitman arm to my drag link, castle nut cotter pin. The other end of my drag link and my upper control arm, castle nut cotter pin. My lower control arm and my tie rod, another castle nut cotter pin. So you got 3 of each.
Now let me get a close up of the castle nut.
See it?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is going to be me in test mode. This is how I put this together in test mode. All you have to do is point at the components and you've got it, okay? My pitman arm, my drag link, my upper and lower control arms, my tie rod, all 3 castle nuts, and all 3 cotter pins are properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Make sense? A lot less breath. Throw it out in one shot. The next components that I'm going to be calling out are all part of my suspension. I'm still buried in there. I haven't worked my way out yet, so I'm still in there. On the front of your truck, the front spring mount is bolted upside down underneath your frame, where when we get back there on section B, it's going to be a big old box hanging off the side of your frame, your front spring mount, okay? To find your back spring mount, this is my front spring mount. So if you want to come around to see this, that's my front spring mount. See it? Alright. Now to find the back spring mount, these are your leaf springs. Follow your springs all the way to the back and all the way back here where you got that angled bolt with the angled iron with the 2 bolts. That's your back spring mount. Okay. So back there is your back spring mount. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use my finger. My front and my back spring mounts are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My leaf springs, everybody see that? My leaf springs properly mounted and secured. Can you see? You're good? My leaf springs are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. And there's no signs of my springs having shifted. Okay? My 2 U-bolts. My 2 U-bolts. Who needs to see them? Here, I'll get down out of the way. Everybody good? My 2 U-bolts are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no rub marks, and there's no shiny threads on the end of the bolts to indicate cross thread or looseness. Everybody good? Last thing on my suspension, shock absorber. My shock absorber is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. Everybody good so far? Sure? Alright. Alright, the next components I'm going to hit, now I'm going to start working my way out. The next components I'm going to hit are my brake system components. Okay, the very next thing I'm going to call out is the last of my hoses. My brake hose is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or freeze, and it's not leaking. My brake chamber and C-clamp. My brake chamber and C-clamp. Everybody good? My brake chamber and C-clamp are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and they're not leaking. Okay? Next components I'm going to call out, on the front of my truck, it's on the front of my brake chamber, where when we get back to section B on the drive tires, and then back on section C on the tandems, it's on the back of the brake chamber and upside down, slack adjuster and push rod. My slack adjuster and push rod. Come on in to see them, whoever hasn't seen them. Slack adjuster, push rod. Slack adjuster, push rod.
Is the push rod the whole thing, or is it just the metal that goes in?
It's this whole assembly here that goes right into the middle of the brake chamber.
Starting here, right?
Okay, what is it again?
Slack adjuster.
Oh, that's the slack adjuster.
And then push rods.
Oh, that's.
Push rods right here.
Oh, okay.
Slack adjuster and push rod. Slack adjuster, push rod. Everybody else good? All right, my slack adjuster and push rod are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. And with the brakes released, I can't pull more than 1 inch of slack. So what they're talking about is with the brakes released, I can't pull more than 1 inch of slack. You don't have to do that, I'm just showing you. Plant the seed, okay? Now, this is where I'm talking about systems. I got my brake hose, I got my brake chamber and C-clamp. I got my slack adjuster and push rod. What'd I forget?
Drums and lining.
There you go, brake drum and brake lining. You cheated. So this time I gotta kind of look upside down. Who needs to see them? My brake drum and brake lining. Brake drum and brake lining. Okay. My brake drum and brake lining.
Oh, the lining's on the inside.
Exactly.
And the drum is on the outside.
Exactly.
The drum goes all the way around, right?
Correct. Brake drum, brake lining. Okay.
And this entire thing here is the lining? Like for
No,
example,
this right here. Everybody else good? I'm going to break them up here and I'll put them together when we get back on section B and C. My brake drum is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no illegal welds or holes. My brake lining is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. And it's not worn dangerously thin or less than 1/4 inch of lining. My whole brake drum and brake lining area is free of any oil, grease, or debris. Make sense? I'm going to take my hand and go from the inside of the face to the outside and say my tire's evenly worn. There's no less than 4/32 of an inch of tread in the tread grooves. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays. I'm going to take a tire gauge and I'm going to hook it up to my valve stem to verify that the PSI level in my tire meets the manufactured rating. My valve stem itself is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. This is one that the inspector said students are forgetting to say. My tire is properly seated against my rim. There's no rust trails to indicate looseness or loss of air. My rim is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no illegal welds or holes. My lug nuts are all properly mounted and secured. not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no rust trails to indicate looseness, and there's no shiny threads on the end of the bolts to indicate cross thread. So far so good. This right here is called your hub oil seal. Hub oil seal. If I was to take a socket and a ratchet and undo all those bolts and pull it off, I'd have like a cup, right? That's the analogy I'm using to describe the hub oil seal. When we get back on section B, you can see the drive tires right there. It's just a big old flat plate right in the middle of the axle. That's your axle seal. This is my hub oil seal. Now remember, anything that has the word seal, not leaking, okay? And this one on the front has an access cap, so I would check to make sure it's at the proper fill level, okay? So here's the call out. My hub oil seal is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. I would check to make sure it's at the proper fill level. That is section 8 in its entirety. Any questions?
Did you mention the lug nuts?
Yep, got them. What I did is I kind of worked my way down right to the middle. Once I get to the hub oil seal, I'm done. Okay. Section B. I'm going to keep rolling. Okay. So section B starts right here, but I forgot what that thing's called. I'm hearing it collectively from everyone. Correct. Marker signal flasher is amber in color and clean. Properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware. Now as we go back, you can go bottom up, top down, doesn't matter, as long as you hit them. I'm going to go bottom, top, middle. My steps are both properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware. They're free of any oil, grease, or debris. Okay? My side mirror and mount. My side mirror and mount are both properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware. My mirrors are clean and they're free of anything that would obstruct my view. Now you're going to do your side mirror again when you're doing your end cap. You're not going to do your mount, but you'll do your side mirror. And this time you'll add to it and they're adjusted to me. Okay? My door and door handle are both properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware. Door opens and closes properly. My weather stripping around my door is properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and it's not leaking. My door hinges, there's 2 of them. My door hinges are both properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware. My fuel tank, remember this is diesel fuel, so it's a fuel tank, not a gas tank. Say gas, I'll say, well, you got some? So, my fuel tank and cap are both properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. My cap's on tight, and it's not leaking. Okay, we go back. This is my fairing. This is my fairing. When I get to the end of my fairing, I'm going to look up. I'm going to call out my 2 DOT reflectors, like the upside down L looking like thing. My 2 DOT reflectors are clear in color and clean. Properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware. Now, if I was doing this in test mode, the very next thing I would hit are my air hose connectors. Okay? These right here are my air hose connectors, but what I'm going to do right now is strictly section B. Now you got a picture incorporating the fifth wheel coupling components as part of your test, right? So if I was doing this in test mode and I had section D, as soon as I called out my 2 DOT reflectors, I would go right to my air hose connectors. In other words, what I'm going to do is just keep working my way back. And I want the service and emergency line hoses and the electric cable, I want that assembly done. Once I get done with that, then I'm going to continue on with section B. Okay? So let's go over to that rig over there so we can kind of spread out and see what I'm talking about. Okay, now the last thing I just called out were my two DOT reflectors, right? Notice I don't have any muffler stacks, so it's got to be down here somewhere. All right, and in this case, right there. My exhaust is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no signs of rust or black soot that would indicate a leak. No signs of rust or black soot that would indicate a leak. Okay? My drive shaft, big old round pipe right in the middle of the frame. My drive shaft is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. And there's no signs of my shaft having twisted. Okay? The other end of my drive shaft, this big old double knuckle looking like piece of metal, my U-joint, universal joint, or U-joint for short. My U-joint is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's free of any debris. Okay, there's no debris. Now I'm going to back up a little bit. My catwalk steps and my catwalk are all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. They're free of any oil, grease, or debris. That's not going to come off. That stuff's nasty. That's not.
That's fine.
I just want to mess your coat up.
Hey,
All right.
that's what I got it for.
Okay. All right. So my catwalk steps on my catwalk is the exact same color as my steps up there, right? Free of any oil, grease, or debris. My frame and cross member. My frame and cross member are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no illegal welds or holes. Now I'm in the middle. Now the game that I play on test day, you got this trailer hooked up, so I got this trailer in my face, right? I got this trailer in my face, and you got minimal space in here. You're going to be standing right here trying to call all this stuff out, and the inspector's going to be where this young man is watching you. Okay? The game that I play is I got these hoses and electric cable hooked up. So I'm going to take my hand. I'm standing right there. I take my hand. I push them down. I put my arm over it just to get them out of my way, and I lean my arm right here as I'm kind of hovering over here, calling all this stuff out. And anything that I can see here, I'm calling out. But anything over here that I can't see, because I get this trailer in my face, I'm looking over here. I'm playing like I'm calling out over here, but anything that I can't see, I'm looking over here, because the same components over here are over here. Same stuff, okay? My brake hoses are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and they're not leaking. My brake chamber and C-clamp. My brake chamber and C-clamp. See it? Guys, good? You can see it over here. Over here is my brake chamber and C-clamp. Brake chamber, C-clamp. Brake chamber, C-clamp. You see it? Okay. So I'll point over here. My brake chamber and C-clamp are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and they're not leaking. Remember on the front?
Much bigger than the brake chamber in the front.
Yep, a lot bigger.
Yeah.
Now remember on the front I said that the slack adjuster and push rod were on the front of the brake chamber. Back here it's on the back and upside down. My slack adjuster and push rod on the bottom. My slack adjuster and push rod. So from over there, I don't know if you can see this one any better. It's kind of hard to see these, but slack adjuster and push rod. Slack adjuster's up here, push rod on the bottom. or over here, if you can see it over here,
It's upside down.
slack adjuster, and push rod's way down there on the bottom. Everybody good? Slack adjuster, push rod. My slack adjuster and push rod are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. And with the brakes released, I can't pull more than 1 inch of slack. Now, thinking in terms of systems again, I got my brake hoses, I got my brake chamber C clamp, I got my slack adjuster and push rod. What did I forget?
Drums and lining.
Brake drum, brake lining. So I'm in the middle, right? I'm jumping over my frame and over my suspension to call out my brake drum and my brake lining, okay? And over here, it's my brake drum and my brake lining. You can barely see it. I can see it from here, but you probably can't see it. Brake drum, brake lining. You guys good? Everybody good? You see it? Okay. This time I'll put them together. My brake drum and brake lining are both properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware. My brake drum has no illegal welds or holes. My brake lining is not worn dangerously thin or less than 1/4 inch of lining. And my whole brake drum and brake lining area is free of any oil, grease, or debris. Good? Now, next components I'm going to call out is my suspension. This big old box hanging off the side, right down from your cross member, right here. It says airliner on it. That's my front spring mount. Now to find your back spring mount, when I was testing a couple weeks ago, I just took my finger and I said my front and back spring mounts, and I was good. But if they were to get picky, right where your shock absorber connects right down here, your springs come up and they hook up to the bottom of that like upside down U-bolt. And my shock absorber connects to it, my springs connect to it, then my springs bend around in a real sharp radius and they hook up to the bottom of my airbag mount. So I would just point there, the guy got picky. But like I said a couple weeks ago when I tested, I said my front and back spring mounts, I was good. Okay? My front and back spring mounts are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My leaf springs are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. And there's no signs of my springs having shifted. Okay? My 2 U-bolts are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no signs of rub marks, and there's no shiny threads on the end of the bolts indicating cross thread or looseness. And the last thing with this trailer in my face, I can't really see it too good, but I can see the outline of it. My shock absorber. My shock absorber is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. Now I want to get down. Now the next thing I'm going to call out, before I continue on, I'm going to throw a couple things out. One is that if you get section B on test day, you only have to do one axle. You don't have to do both axles. Okay? Same thing if I got section C, I only have to do one axle on the tandems. Okay? So if I got section D on test day, I have to do the steer axle, one axle here, and one axle back there on the tandems. Make sense? The other thing I'm going to throw out, I've already got my suspension, I'm working my way out. Next thing on my list is right here. This is my splash guard. Now your paperwork, if you looked at the inspector's version of the paperwork, it's calling out a splash guard. But it's saying that you've got DOT reflective tape covering 100% of the width of the splash guard. That's your mud flap. Mud flap has to have the DOT reflective tape. Okay? This is where I go back to saying you got 1 of 5 different inspectors on test day. One inspector might be waiting to hear the magic word splash guard. The other inspector might be waiting to hear the magic words DOT reflective tape. So in other words, I'm going to say too much and make sure I get the points versus not saying enough and taking a chance of getting hit on points. So long story short, I'm going to call it out the way I see it. My splash guard is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. It's covering 100% of the width of my tire, at least 50% down. It's not dragging on the ground. It's not rubbing against my tire. Good? Now I'm going to stand up since you're over there. Right now I'm on my tire. I already got my brake drum and brake lining, okay, because I thought about the system. So I'm done with that system. I'm working my way out. My tires are both evenly worn. There's no less than what? 2/32 of an inch of tread and tread grooves. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays on either tire. I'm going to take a tire gauge and I'm going to hook it up to both valve stems to verify that the PSI level in the tires meets the manufacturer rating. My valve stems themselves are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and they're not leaking. So far so good? This right here is called my bud spacing, B-U-D, bud spacing. My bud spacing is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. It's free of debris, and my tires are evenly spaced. One thing the inspector says students were forgetting to say is that the tires are evenly spaced. So remember that one, okay? Now, it brings me out. Both of my tires are properly seated against my rims. There's no rust trails to indicate looseness or loss of air. My rims are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no illegal welds or holes. My lug nuts, which are in the back, my lug nuts are all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no rust trails to indicate looseness, and there's no shiny threads on the end of the bolts to indicate cross thread. Okay, remember up there you had the hub oil seal, that big old flat plate right there in the middle of the axle? My axle seal. Axle seal is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. Okay, now I'm going to go back, and at this point I'm going to squat down to see what I missed. And remember, I'm only doing one axle, right? So I'm going to stand up so you can see what I'm doing, but my cutoff, now I'm not doing anything on the fifth wheel coupling at this point. I'm strictly talking section B. So I'm really, like, at this point I'm from the frame down, right? My cutoff point is right here, over there, because this big old device right here, right below my stick, that's the front spring mount for your back axle. So my cutoff point's right here. And I'm looking over here and I see, from squatting down here, I see the top of my shock absorber. I'm good, I already got that. So I'm looking back behind it, and the only other thing that I see is my airbag. Remember that your airbag, every airbag has airbag mounts, plural, top and bottom. My airbag mounts are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My airbag is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and it's not leaking. Good? Brings me back. Nothing on the back axle, brings me back. My mud flap is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. It's covering 100% of the width of my tires, at least 50% down. It's not dragging on the ground. It's not rubbing against my tires. I've got DOT reflective tape covering 100% of the width of my mud flap. It's red and white in color. It's clean, and it's not ripped or torn. Now I got this trailer here, right? I've got to get underneath to do the next thing. You can't do it from the side, okay? I'm going to crawl underneath the trailer. I'm squatting down right here with this trailer over my head, and I'm going to call this assembly out first. This right here wraps up section B. But while I'm under here, I'm going to make one call out on my coupling while I'm here. In other words, I'm not getting under here twice. All right. While I'm here, I'm going to wrap up section B, and then I'm going to call out one of the areas of the coupling. My two reflectors are red in color and clean, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. These are your tail lights. Call them out as your tail lights and then tell them what they do. My tail lights, including my brake lights, running lights, blinkers, and flashers, are red in color and clean, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. You don't have to do your backup light, okay? At this point, I'm going to point forward, and I'm going to say that my kingpin and locking jaws are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. And my locking jaws are securely locked around the shank portion of my kingpin. Okay, that's one of your coupling call-outs right there.
Can we see the locking jaw now? Is it visible?
It's actually, you're looking at the very end of it right there. It's not, right now you're uncoupled. There's no trailer hooked up.
So you can't
so
see
it's
it.
actually in the open position. It's not locked around anything. But when we get a truck that's already hooked up and coupled, I'll show you. All right, now, let me slide around you. Okay, this big old chunk of steel, that goes from end to end all the way up to the front of my trailer, this solid piece of steel is called your apron. This is your apron. Now remember, whatever section you get, don't forget to call out the apron, because the apron is part of your coupling. It's not part of section C, your trailer, okay? The call out is, my apron is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no illegal welds or holes, okay? That right there, that's your kingpin. That's the kingpin. And that little hollowed out section right there in the bottom portion, that's the shank part of your kingpin. That's where I was saying a second. Okay, now, what I'm going to be calling out right now is my coupling section. If I had section A, as soon as I got down to my hub oil seal, the inspector is probably going to say something. All right, you done with section A? Yes, sir. Okay, drop the hood. So I dropped the hood. All right, now tell me everything about fifth wheel coupling. So now you're going to walk him back, and you're going to talk about the fifth wheel coupling, right? That's where I'm starting. I'm always going to start on the tractor end. I'm going to continue in the middle. I'm going to go to the trailer end, and then I'm going to make a final call out in the middle. That's just my flow, okay? If I had section B, as I'm coming back, I'm starting at my marker signal flasher. As soon as I get back to the end of my fairing, I'm calling out my 2 DOT reflectors. As soon as I get those 2 DOT reflectors done, right there, air hose connectors. I'm going to get all these called out. Once I'm done with this, then I'm going down here to call out my exhaust and my drive shaft, and just keep working my way back. Once I get done with my drive tires on this axle, now I'm going to squat down in the middle and call out my airbag and airbag mounts. Then I'm going to hit all that. Make sense? And then I'm going to keep going back to my mud flaps. If I had section C, the trailer, I'm starting right there. In other words, I'm going to get the fifth wheel coupling components done first. That way, the only thing left in my mind is the trailer. I've already got all my coupling components done. Make sense? Okay. Remember, not leaking, not leaking, not leaking. Okay? My 2 air hose connectors are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and they're not leaking. Now, my own flow, I happen to get these together, but if you want to break it up and do them individually, that's your call. My electrical cable connectors on my tractor and my trailer are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. I'd pull them out, make sure that all 7 pins are intact and not broken, and the connector's free of debris. Now remember, you're not doing that, you're just telling them. No,
say no abrasion, no cut, no fry. No price on that?
not here. Now I am. Now I'll get this one first. Remember the two places on the truck I said you had to call out those two electrical cables and those additional words? This is the other one. This is your electric cable or pigtail, okay? My electric cable is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays. There's no illegal tape. There's no splices, and the insulation is not brittle or cracked. My service and emergency line hoses are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and they're not leaking.
Rolling.
All right. These are your glad hands. I'm going to call them out both out. My two glad hands are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and they're not leaking. I would pull them off and make sure that the rubber grommet is intact and the holes are free of any debris. Now remember, do not take these off. You're just telling them, okay? I'm just showing you so you know what you're talking about when you're pointing them out. But do not remove these. If you remove them, you got to be able to put them back on. Otherwise, you just failed. Because the air brake test, you got to have these hooked up to your trailer, right? All right, I have one final call out in the middle. My electric cable and my service and emergency line hoses are all properly suspended above my catwalk, and they're not all tangled up. Everybody good?
And those are the dummy connectors, right?
Dummy connector, yep. Dummy coupler. Okay. Now I'm on the fifth wheel assembly. This right here is my fifth wheel air supply line. My fifth wheel air supply line is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and it's not leaking. My air cylinder is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. Okay? On each side of your platform over here on your rail, you got 6 mounting bolts. All these mounting bolts. Okay? Over there, it's these guys. That one all greased up. My 6 mounting bolts are all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no shiny threads on the end of the bolts that would indicate cross thread or looseness. If you're looking dead on into the middle of this skid plate, on the inside of it, you have a solid piece of metal that kind of looks like a triangle in there. Over there, it's this thing right here. That's your platform. That's your platform. It's an easy call out, just remember it's there. My platform is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Now the next 3 components I'm going to call out, if you were looking at your inspector's version of the paperwork, it's on 2 different pages. And that doesn't make sense to me because it's all the same call out. It's almost all the same function. So a lot easier to throw it together. I'm going to throw all these together. Underneath your skid plate, right about here, you have something called a safety latch. Okay, you've got a safety latch under there. On the side, you've got the 5th wheel release handle. That's your safety latch. And then you've got the 5th wheel release handle right there. And then on the 5th and 6th slots of your rail back there, you got these little pins that are stuck in there. They're called locking pins. These 2 guys right there, that's your locking pins. You see them? This being your rail. Count 1, 2, 3, 4. Should be right in there. You got 2 locking. I see that one right there. Those are your locking pins. I'm putting all these together. My safety latch, my release handle, and my 2 locking pins are all properly mounted and secure. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware. And they're all in the locked position. Okay? My skid plate. That's your skid plate. My skid plate is properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. not missing any hardware, and it's properly greased. Now the next thing I would be calling out is where I would crawl underneath the middle of the trailer, and I'd be calling out my kingpin and locking jaws as being properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. And my locking jaws are securely locked around the shank portion of my kingpin. Now that obviously is not, because we're bobtailing here, but if you had the tractor and trailer hooked up, it would be locked, okay? You'd see that bar going all the way across, okay? There's one more thing I need to show you on the coupling. It's called 303. Alright, this is called 303. I've got 3 foot from the end of my fairing to my header board. 3 foot. Okay? I've got zero clearance. I've got zero clearance from my skid plate to my apron. Alright? And then I've got at least 3 foot from the end of my mud flap to my landing gear. So 303. Make sense? Okay. Remember that one. That's part of your coupling. Tractor, assuming it was hooked up. Okay. As I was going back, if he said I had section C, I'm starting right there at my air hose connectors, right? Getting all my hoses and electric cable done, all the way to my glad hands. Call it all out. It said they're all properly suspended above my catwalk, not all tangled up. I get my 303. Now, in my mind, the only thing I got left is my trailer, right? Very first thing you want to remember to do when you're in your mind set that all I got left is my trailer, back up. Keep backing up until you see it. Depending on the trailer, on test day, I can see both of those from here. That one right there, I'm blind. I can't see it.
I can't see it either.
So you want to back up so you make sure you don't miss that point, okay?
So it's called clearance lights?
Right, my clearance lights. My clearance lights are amber in color and clean. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Now I'm going to come up to it. This right here is my header board, okay? This is my header board. And these are all rivets. Alright? There's 4 places on my trailer I'm going to say is cargo worthy. Okay? Header board, side of my trailer, the floor back there behind my apron, and my back doors. It's cargo worthy. Okay? Here we go.
Is the header board the entire thing, or is it just
the front?
Just that? No, what I mean is it the whole front? Like
the whole front, yep.
From here all of it, right?
Right. My header board. My header board is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. It's not missing any rivets, and it's cargo worthy. Side of my trailer, just like it sounds. Side of my trailer is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's cargo worthy. I've got DOT reflective tape covering 50%, at least 50% of my trailer. It's red and white in color. It's clean, and it's not ripped or torn. Now we go back. When I get to my landing gear, I always squat down because there's 2 other things I want to hit and make sure I get before I get to my landing gear while I'm under here. All the way up and down the whole length of my trailer, I have my trailer cross members and my floor, okay? My trailer cross members are all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no illegal welds or holes. My floor is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's cargo worthy. Okay? Now I'm on my landing gear. My landing gear has its own set of cross members. These right here, my cross members. okay? And I have my frame. I've got my leg and my foot. I've got my crank and my crank handle. Here's how I put it together. I've got my landing gear cross members, my frame, my leg, and my foot are all properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My leg is raised all the way up. My foot is free of debris. My crank is operational, and my handle is secured. Now, obviously, the leg's all the way down because it's detached, but it will be up and hooked up to your truck on test day. That makes sense? Anybody have any questions? All right. Now we go back. What was that? Hey, she's got it.
Marker
You
signal
got it.
flasher.
Yes, sir. My marker signal flasher is amber in color and clean. Properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken. Not missing any hardware. Now, at this point, my next stop is the tandems. I would strongly suggest you've got to get underneath this thing. All trailers are not created equal. You got spring rides, you got air rides, and even with those two categories, you still have a mixed match of components back there depending on what trailer you're working with. Typically, you'll have either a spring ride assembly or an air ride assembly as far as components. There is one truck out here, one trailer out here that I've seen has it all, okay? So I'm going to kind of throw that little tidbit in once we get done with the front part of the tandems, okay? So I'm coming back here. All right, now the very first thing I'm going to hit, my frame, my tandem frame. My tandem frame is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no illegal welds or holes. Now I'm in here. My brake hoses are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and they're not leaking. My brake chamber and seat clamp, so you can see it over here, my brake chamber and seat clamp are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and they're not leaking. Now, if I look down here, I can't really see the majority of my slack adjuster, but I can see the bottom of it, my slack adjuster, and my push rod. So over here, slack adjuster and push rod. My slack adjuster and push rod are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. And with the brakes released, I can't pull more than a 1 inch of slack. Thinking of brake systems, I got my brake hoses, I got my brake chamber seat clamp, I got my slack adjuster and push rod. What'd I forget?
Drums, lines.
Brake drum and brake lining. Easy one to forget because on this particular type of trailer, that's blocking it. Okay, so I gotta look inside when I'm on test day. I gotta look inside, and right about here I can barely see it. My brake drum and brake lining, but I can see it. My brake drum and brake lining are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My brake drum has no illegal welds or holes. My brake lining is not worn dangerously thin, less than a 1/4 inch of lining. My brake drum and brake lining area is free of any oil, grease, or debris. Good? Now I'm hitting the suspension. This is where the trailers differ, okay? This being an air ride system, I see a shock absorber and an airbag. Remember, every airbag has airbag mounts, top and bottom. So my shock absorber is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. My airbag mounts are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My airbag is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and it's not leaking. So far so good? Now I'm going to work my way out. The next components that I'm going to call out, this is one of those areas that differs trailer to trailer. This right here is my tandem release handle. You've got release pins right up here. You got one pin right here and another one way back there. What happens is when I pull this handle up, these pins will pop in, okay? And with these pins popped in, I can leave my tandem tires locked, and I can go jump up in my tractor and I can release my tractor brakes, and with these pins popped in I can roll forward or backwards, and this whole trailer runs on this rail, and I can reposition the tandems according to weight. Let's say I was 48,000 pounds heavy, and they loaded a lot of the weight in the back, so my back axle is really heavy. I could roll forward, which in turn would keeping these locked would in turn put these way back there. So I just redistributed the weight. I got some of the weight off of that back axle. Make sense? Okay.
Yeah, finally. I mean, I didn't understand it before. So this is starting here.
Yep.
All the way down is really the tandem.
Yep.
So you can either.
Oh, this is the tandem right here.
This right here.
Yeah. This is the rail.
Oh, that's the rail.
The trailer runs.
This here is the tandem.
Right. This whole assembly is the tandem.
Okay, so you can shift the wheels down, back,
Yeah,
and you can bring them forward.
If I kept these locked,
Yeah.
I pull this handle up, these pins pop in. Now I can roll forward with these locked and put these tires way back there. So if it was really heavy back there, I just redistributed the weight. Took a lot of the weight off of the back.
Yep.
Make sense? Or vice versa.
Yeah.
All right, so the call out for the tandem release, you either have a tandem release handle that goes up and down, or you have a release handle that pulls in and out, like the fifth wheel release handle, or the sweetest type is a button. The button is air powered. So the call out's the same, but if you have the little air powered button, you would say, and the button's not leaking, okay? So the call out is my tandem release handle, and my release pins are all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and they're all in the locked position. Make sense?
Yes.
If by chance on the trailer that you get on test day you don't see any handle up here and you don't see the button, look in the middle of the axles, because there's a couple trailers out here where the tandem release handle is right in the middle of the two axles. It will be here. All trailers have them. It's just a matter of where it is. Okay? Everybody good with the tandem release handle and the pins?
Oh, yes.
I'm on the tires. I already got my brake drum and brake lining, so I'm good to work my way out. My tires are both evenly worn. There's no less than 2/32 of an inch of tread in the tread grooves. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays on either tire. I'm going to take a tire gauge and I'm going to hook it up to both of my valve stems to verify that the PSI level on both tires meets the manufacturer's rating. My valve stems themselves are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and they're not leaking. My bud spacing is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. It's free of any debris, and the tires are evenly spaced. Both of my tires are properly seated against my rims. There's no rust trails to indicate looseness or loss of air. My rims are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no illegal welds or holes. My lug nuts are all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no rust trails indicating looseness, and there's no shiny threads on the bolts that would indicate cross thread. Remember up in the front you had the hub oil seal? And now you're back to hub oil seal again.
Oh, there's a hub too?
Front and back, hub oil seal. Now, when you get back here, some of these trailers you'll see a little see-through glass plate. If you have a see-through glass plate, you would say, and it's at the proper fill level, okay? This just being a solid piece of metal, you wouldn't say that. I'm just going to use the 3 acronyms and it's not leaking. But if you see a little glass plate right here, say, and it's at the proper fill level. Okay? In this case, my hub oil seal is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and it's not leaking. Now, okay, nothing on the back axle. Brings me back. My mud flap is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. It's covering 100% of the width of my tires, at least 50% down. It's not supposed to be rubbing against the ground, and it's not supposed to be rubbing against my tires. Now somebody here is probably wondering about the DOT reflective tape. You don't have to have it back here on the trailer, only on the tractor. Okay? And okay, as I go back, this right here is my door hook. Alright? If you don't see that, look for a hole, because some of these trailers have a hole, and inside the hole you've got a metal bar that's welded to the bottom of the hole. It's the same thing. These being swing doors, you swing the door open, you got a little ring on the bottom of it. Just hook that ring over here, it holds the doors open. My door hook is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. This right here, if you don't, right, ABS light, if you don't see the stamp on the lens, look up here. ABS. My ABS light is amber in color and clean. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Remember everywhere else on the truck I was challenging you with, what is that, marker signal flasher? This one here is just a marker light. It just lights up. And it's always going to be red. It lets traffic know where the end of your trailer is at night. So my marker light is red in color and clean. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Brings us to the back.
Is that the same as the marker lights up? But different color though, but the same purpose, right?
Those are clearance lights.
Clearance, okay.
This is a marker light.
Marker light.
Okay, remember how you started out section C? Don't back up too far, but you always want to look up. And they're always going to be red back here. Back here they're always red, okay? My clearance lights are red in color and clean. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. Now, one thing that's easy to forget or not see, look at those 2 upside down hills. My 2 DOT reflectors are white in color, looks like, and clean. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. All my hinges are all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My door latches are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. And they're operational. That's all I do to show they're operational. All these and these I put together. My door locks and my door rings are all present. They're all properly mounted and secured. Not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My doors are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware, and they're cargo worthy. I've got DOT reflective tape covering 100% of the width of my doors. It's red and white in color, it's clean, and it's not supposed to be ripped or torn. Okay, one thing that would be really easy to forget back here, especially if you get section D and you're like mentally fried at this point, weather stripping. My weather stripping around my doors is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays, and they're not leaking. Brings me down to my lights. Now, when I'm in the back of the trailer, everything else I did so far is on the driver's side, right? Back here, I'm hitting everything, okay? when I'm doing my lights, they want you to call out all your lights, and they want to hear the word tail. They want to hear the word tail lights, okay? My tail lights, and then they want you to know what point. I'll look in here. All right, I've got DOT reflective tape covering 100% of my DOT bumper. It's red and white in color. It's clean, and it's not supposed to be ripped or torn. And that said, sir, I would now do the same thing all the way down the passenger side of my rig. And that said, I'm now ready for my in-cab inspection. Does that make sense? So in other words, you're telling them this is how I would do the same thing all the way down the passenger side. And now with that said, I'm ready for my in-cab inspection. Right, you don't have to do it. So now, sir, I'm ready for my in-cab inspection. He's going to say, okay, first thing I want you to do is external light check. Turn it around. Well, can I get your help? Well, I work the controls in the truck. Can you run around the truck for me and make sure all these lights are working? Just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down as I work the controls. Yeah, I can do that. Now, that little conversation led up to, okay, this is the light. These are the lights I want to check. You've got to tell him which lights you want him to check. That's the only way you're going to get credit for it. So you got to tell him, which lights you want me to check? All of them? Nah, doesn't work. You just got 0 points. You got to say which lights, okay? So you're already back here, right? So back here, sir, I want to check my clearance lights, and I want to check all my tail lights, including my running lights, my brake lights, my blinkers, and my flashers. Then on both sides of my trailer, follow me, I'm intentionally stopping right here, right in front of the landing gear. I'm intentionally stopping right in front of the landing gear because the senior inspector told me before he cut out of here, he said that all the students were forgetting about the taillights on the truck. So I'm purposely stopping here to remind you so you don't forget. And I'm going to say, all right, sir, on both sides of my trailer, I want to check all my clearance lights. I want to check my marker signal flasher lights, and then under my tractor I want to check my tail lights, including my brake lights, my running lights, my blinkers, and my flashers. Make sense? Yeah. Then on the front of my truck, I want to check my clearance lights, my headlights, my high beams, and my marker signal flashers. Does that make sense? Okay, so he's standing up here. I'm going to walk around to get in. Okay, I think you've all been shown all this, but I just want to cover it again. We just had that little conversation. I just walked him around the truck showing him which lights I wanted him to help me test, right? He's standing up there. I walk around, I get in. I'm going to turn my key to the on position, let my gauges sweep for a second. But I'm talking to myself because he's out there. All right, now, he's out there looking at me, I'm looking at him. Marker lights. I just lit this thing up like a Christmas tree. I lit up my clearance lights in the front. I lit up my marker lights in the front. I lit up my clearance lights all the way around this trailer. I lit up my marker lights all the way down this marker light here and all the way down mid-size on my trailer. I lit up my running lights on my tractor and the running lights on my trailer. One click. Okay, but he's up here. He's still looking at me. He's looking at my clearance lights, marker lights. I get a thumbs up. 2 clicks. Headlights. Thumbs up. Push down on your blinker switch. High beams. Thumbs up. As soon as I get that thumbs up on the high beams, my own flow, I turn these off. And I'm going to turn them on again when he gets back there. But he's still up there. Left blinker. Thumbs up. Right blinker. Thumbs up. Flashers, little triangle on the right side of my steering wheel, thumbs up. Now he's walking around to the back. As he's walking around to the back, I'm adjusting my mirrors. 2 two reasons. One, so I can see the dude, and the other reason, so I remember to say, and they're adjusted to me when I call out my mirrors. Now he's all the way in the back. He's looking at me in the side mirror. I'm looking at him. Marker lights. Thumbs up. Turn them off. Left blinker. Thumbs up. Right blinker. Thumbs up. Flashers. Thumbs up. And because he's back there, brakes. Thumbs up. Now he walks around to get in. He gets in. Lights are good? Yep, lights are good. Okay, I'm going to begin my in-cab inspection. That's where it starts. Make sense?
So far you didn't start the truck. You could do all that without starting the truck.
Right, I just turned my key to the on position.
Yeah, just the on position.
Yep.
Without starting.
Yep. Now, here's my flow. Lights are good? Yep, lights are good. Okay, I'm going to begin my in-cab inspection. My seat belt is properly mounted, click, and secured.
And you have to remain on? No? Okay.
It's not cut, torn, or frayed. It's adjusted to me. Detaches properly. Now I'm going to perform a safe start. My gauge is already swept while you and I were checking the external lights. Spring brake valves are pulled out. Vehicle is in neutral. That's a safe start. Now from there, I start calling stuff out. The very first things that I hit are my gauges, and then right after my gauges, my heater and defrost. Reason I do that, there's two things on this truck that'll help you to fail. One involves points, and one involves a flat-out pass or fail scenario. The one that involves the pass or fail, I'll show you when you get in here group by group. Or you might have already shown them yesterday. But the one that involves points, these trucks are programmed to shut off on you all by themselves. If I have no interaction with the accelerator or the brake after so many minutes, the damn thing shuts off. So because of that, the very first thing I hit, as soon as I fire up that engine, as soon as I perform that safe start, right to my gauges. As soon as I'm done with my gauges, right to my heater and defrost. Now, if I happen to be the world's slowest tucker, and this damn thing shuts off on me, doesn't matter. Because I already hit my gauges and heater and defrost. And I never touched that key. The key's still in the on position. The engine shut off, yeah, but I never touched that key. So anything up here I still need to call anything that I still need to call out and get credit for, because the key's still in the on position, I can still do it. Make sense? Okay. So as I'm going through here, I'm calling everything out. When you get up here, I'll show you which you already know from Antonio from yesterday, which gauges to call out, the heater and defrost and all that, how to do them. Okay. So I'm just going to go through it. I'll just take a group up here and go through it. I know that you haven't seen it yet, so I'll show you. But once I get done with as I'm going through my in-cab inspection, I'm calling out various components. You all saw it yesterday. When I'm calling out my gauges, I'm calling out my water temperature gauge, my oil pressure gauge, my primary and secondary tank gauges, and my battery gauge. To call out your battery gauge, you have a display right in the middle of your dashboard. You got a plus sign on your steering wheel. Just keep pushing the plus sign and the menu changes until you see a little picture of the battery. As soon as you see that picture of the battery, call it out. My battery gauge is working properly. It's showing that my alternator's charging my batteries at whatever it says, 13.8 volts or 14 point, whatever it reads out, okay? As soon as I'm done with that, right to the heater and defrost, right? You got three knobs up here. One is a fan control, one is a temperature, and one is a directional control. Turn the left one all the way to the right, which is high. Turn the middle one all the way to the right, which is hot. And then the third dial, turn it 2 notches from the far right. That blows it up and down at the same time. Stick your hand down till you feel it. Stick your hand up till you feel it. All right, my heater and defrost are both working properly. Make sense? When I'm doing my windshield wipers, I call them out first. That's just my way of doing it. I call them out first, then I show that they're working. To show that they're working, take your blinker switch and push in, like you're pushing it right through your steering column. It makes the wiper. Okay, now on this particular trailer, I've got the tandem frame, same thing. Brake hoses, same thing. Brake chamber C-clamp, same thing. Slack adjuster push rod, same thing. Brake drum, brake lining, same stuff. But this is why I get in the middle. This piece of steel right here from the outside, you can't tell what it is. But from the inside, I can see what's hooked up to it. Spring leaves. Leaf springs. So you got your front and back spring mounts. You got your leaf springs. You got your 2 U-bolts. But what's the other component you would typically be looking for?
Your torque arm?
Shock absorber.
No.
I don't see one, do you? This is the one trailer I was talking about. This is the one trailer that I was talking about. If you get stuck with this on test day, I'm going to show you exactly what I was talking about. Now, up here, instead of a shock absorber, you have a torque bar and a torque arm. Somewhere here so you can see it. This right here, this small piece of metal, that's the torque bar. The torque arm is right here. Kind of looks like an I-beam on a building under construction. That's the torque arm. Call them out. You won't get the point unless you point them out and call them out right. So the torque bar and the torque arm.
The thick one is the arm.
Yeah.
You said the bar is on the driver's side?
Yep. This is the bar right here. Okay, now the torque bar and the torque arm, the call out is my torque bar and torque arm are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. 3 acronyms. You already know the spring mounts, the leaf springs, and the U-bolts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everybody good? Come around over to this side of the trailer real quick. Remember the last trailer you had the pull handle that went up and down?
Yeah.
This one's like the release handle on the 5th wheel. You pop it up, pull it out, and those pins will pop in. Now the thing I wanted to show you, as soon as that train goes by, this is a spring ride, right? The last one we just did was an air ride. You had the shock absorber and the airbags. This is the one I was talking about. If you get this on test day, this is why I'm telling you to take a quick second to peek from behind the axle forward just to make sure you don't see anything hiding back there. In this case scenario, as I look back right here, you see on the back end,
The
shock absorber and an airbag. So this is the trailer that's got it all.
Okay.
All
It's
the
got,
other-
it's got spring in there, but
Exactly. So you don't want to miss those points.
This is trailer number.
yes.
All right. The very first thing I'm going to explain, wow, we got a, what you call full house.
Can you stand up on the chair?
All right, the very first thing I'm going to explain, typically I explain in the classroom, and some of you might have seen it. Who here already had your permit? Doesn't matter. Those that already had a permit, I showed you on a whiteboard something that I can either do in here or on the whiteboard in the classroom. I'm going to explain it here. It's my secondary stick. Okay. With my engine running, my air compressor is pumping air. And it continues to pump air into the tanks. I got a primary and a secondary tank, okay? And these are my primary and secondary tank gauges, all right? Now, with my engine running, the air's pumping into these tanks. Just for illustrative purposes, I'm going to talk about one tank, okay? So the air's filling in this tank. And as the air's filling, gauges are climbing, okay? I get the air governor cut out. You hear that air governor cutting out. Now you've reached the max capacity in that tank, or those tanks, okay? Now under the floor, I've got this tank. When I push in my spring brake valves, what I just did was I pushed air out of the tank. And in doing that, in pushing the air out of the tank, what I did was I just pressurized the back end of the tank, which means all my brake hoses that run up to the front and the drive tires, the supply lines that go all the way back to the tandems, I just filled up those air lines. And so what I'm checking on the first step is the 4 psi air loss step. I'm checking the integrity of my entire air brake system. I'm checking my brake hoses. I'm checking my brake chambers. I'm checking those C-clamps that are wrapped around the brake chambers holding them together. I'm checking all that stuff, okay? When I pull these out, I just threw all that air out of the system, out of the brake hoses, brake chambers. I just threw all that air out. When I pushed them in initially and pressurizing that back end of the system, all the air, the brake hoses, brake chambers, and all that, what I did inside my brake chamber, if I'm holding a brake chamber in my hand right now, there's a big old spring in that, okay? And what I'm doing when I pressurize those hoses is I'm pushing that spring back. And through a combination of components that you learned in permit class, including your S-cam, you just caused your brake lining to release from your brake drum. So when I push them in, that air pushes back, hits those brake chambers, pushes those springs back, causing your brakes to release. Now, the first step, the 4 psi air loss step, what you're testing is to make sure, long story short, you don't have any leaks. Because once the system settles, once the gauges stop moving, then I'm going to press the service brake. I'm going to press and hold it. Like I'm at a stoplight in my car. I'm just going to sit there and hold my brake. And I'm going to count to a minute. And in 1 minute's time, in a combination vehicle, meaning tractor and trailer, in 1 minute's time, in a combination vehicle, I should not lose more than 4 psi. What that means is I shouldn't lose more than 4 more psi than I already lost when I pushed these in, right? It's only going to take about 4 or 5 seconds for that additional no more than 4 more psi to get lost when you're holding your service brake, okay? So, because it only takes about 4 or 5 seconds, even though I say I'm going to be counting to a minute, after about 4, 1005, 1006, when somewhere around there, the inspector is going to say, all right, we'll call that a minute. Reason being, it's only going to take 4 or 5 more seconds. He's not going to wait while you're going 53, 1054. No, man, after 4 or 5, we're good. But here's the trick. If by chance you get to like 10, 1000, 11, 1000, 12, 1000, when's this dude going to call it? 32, something's wrong. You did something wrong. And the inspector told me, he said, if the student gets to like 10, 11, 12, 1000, I haven't called it, tell him to look at my eyes. Because I'm going to be looking right at the problem. So I'm like 10, 1000, 11, 1000, 12, oh crap, sir, I forgot to push those in. Can I start over? They will let you start over depending on the severity of the glitch. If the error is too big, they won't let you start over. That, you just failed. In other words, my first test, I'm going to perform a 4 psi air loss. I'm going to go ahead and perform a safe start, fire up the truck, you just failed. Because the engine's got to be off for the first 3 steps. Your key is in the on position so you can watch your gauges, but the engine itself is off. Okay? So far so good?
Yes.
Second step, the low air indicator light and buzzer. Now I'm going to fan my brakes down to about 60 psi, at which time my low air indicator light and buzzer should come on. So now you start pumping the brakes. As soon as you hear that buzzer come on, count to 5. Hit the brakes 5 more times. Reason being, that secondary gauge, that needle on the secondary gauge, that's the first one that's going to trigger that buzzer and alarm. That buzzer and alarm, the buzzer and the light. Okay? What happens is, as soon as a student hears that, they take their foot off the brake. All right, I've just confirmed that my low air indicator light and buzzer are working properly. Sometimes, because that secondary gauge triggered that alarm and buzzer, alarm and light, you're right at that threshold of on-off with the buzzer and the light. And as soon as that system settles, if you're looking at your gauges are like this. Secondary triggered it, but your primary is a little bit heavier. You got a little more air in there. Sometimes as soon as the system settles, that buzzer that just came on just went back off. And you got to have the buzzer and light on when you call it out. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Third step, 20 to 40 psi spring brake valves pop out. Now I'm going to continue to fan my brakes down to between 20 to 40 psi, at which time both of my spring brake valves should pop out. Do you understand what that means when they pop out?
Yes.
What?
It means now we don't have enough air to keep the springs away from the brakes, so it'll actually
Perfect.
yeah.
Which in turn is testing
It's like-
your what?
Spring break.
Springs, yeah, the
You're
springs.
testing your backup emergency spring brake systems. The description that I use in the classroom is your car. What's your car made of? Your brake system. Hydraulics.
Hydraulics.
What if I was to go out there and sabotage your brakes? Take a knife and cut one of your hoses right in half. All the fluid drains out on the ground. What happens next time you hit the brakes?
It'll go up to the floor.
All the way to the ground. You got nothing. Now you're right. You're screwed. Now you got to grab that emergency handle and pull that thing up, which is a wire that goes back to your drive tires to stop your car. These trucks don't have that. Instead, they have the backup emergency brake system, a spring brake system. So, worst case scenario, you're starting to lose air. You get down to 60. Your truck's saying, "Hey, man, get off the road now. You got a problem. You just lost half the air in your tanks." And whatever the situation is that caused you to keep losing air, that keeps going down between 20 to 40 psi, those spring brake valves pop out, you're stopping. Whether you want to or not, those spring brakes are stopping you dead stop wherever you are. That's your backup mechanical spring brake system at work. Make sense?
Is it just like stepping on the brakes and not letting it go with the spring brakes? Like
Yeah,
if you had to apply the brakes.
Yeah,
it's
but
just like
you have a habit, you and I have a habit of slowly stopping that truck. That thing is going to come to a screeching halt. Every wheel's going to lock up.
that's bad.
You're stopping dead in your tracks no matter where you are.
And that could cause a jackknife too, couldn't it?
Oh yeah, it could cause major things. So once that buzzer, if and when the buzzer ever goes off, get off the road. So, the first 3 steps with the engine off. When the so rule number 1 is once you push these spring brake valves in for your first 4 psi air loss test, don't touch, because they're going to pop out all by themselves on the 3rd step, right? Now, when these pop out, you pop out. You're going to jump out of the truck, get the 2 chocks, put them back in your side bin, get back in. Now you're going to be performing a safe start to build the air all the way back up the air governor cutout, so that now you can proceed with your 4th step, the tug test. When I get to the tug test, I'm going to show you how I do it before I go through this simulated test like I'm a student being tested. I'm going to show you, because there's a little trick to it. And when I show you, I'm going to show you the very last step first. I'm going to show you the service brakes test first, and then we're going to back up and go to the tug test. Okay? There's a reason for that. So, let me go back now to the in-cab inspection. The in-cab inspection is the thing that you do just prior to your air brake test. The air brake test is the very last thing you're going to do for pre-trip. Okay? The way I do it, if you were to look at the inspector's manual, the way the inspector's manual does it is absolutely opposite from the way I do it. And the reason is this: before you even get out of the classroom, the inspector will have already set up your truck for the test, meaning he's going to fan your brakes to where the air pressure in both of your tanks is going to be somewhere below 100. Okay? Now, the way that the paperwork shows it, not mine, but the inspector's version of the paperwork shows it, I get in here, we do our external light check. He gets in, lights are good? Lights are good. Okay, I'm going to begin my in-cab inspection. At this point, I call out everything in this truck that I can call out. Then I remember that I got to have my engine on when I'm calling out my gauges and my heater and defrost, right? So now I'm performing a safe start. Now just tie me in your mind. My water temperature gauge is working properly. It's rising to the proper operating temperature. My oil pressure gauge is working properly. It's rising to the proper PSI level. My primary and secondary tank gauges are working properly. My needles are climbing as air is being pumped into my tanks. My battery gauge is working properly. It's showing that my alternator's charging my batteries at, let's say, 13.8 volts. Now I'm going to check my heater and defrost. All the way hot. Alright, my heater and defrost are working properly. And now I'm ready to perform my air brake test. I'm going to turn my engine off, I'm going to get out, I'm going to chalk my wheels. Right? Why?
You didn't do your emergency equipment.
Huh? Oh, I called all that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I called everything I could before firing up the engine. Why did I fail?
You didn't do the one show.
No, I got all that.
You didn't let the pressure build up.
You didn't hear me, but I got it. I called out everything in here. Huh?
The tree reflecting.
Nope.
No.
Nope. Here's the
Check
reason.
wheels?
Nope.
Before he even got us to check the wheels.
Right. Here's the reason.
Seatbelt.
I didn't.
No.
Nope. I didn't allow enough time for the air governor to cut out. You've got to call out the air governor cutout. It's an absolute. I had a young lady, I think it was last week. She did everything perfect, but she forgot to call out the air governor cutout. She failed. Everything perfect, and she failed because she didn't call it out. You've got to call that out. Now, let's go back to the way I do it. I do it absolutely backwards. Lights are good? Lights are good. Okay, I'm going to begin my in-cab inspection. My seat belt, it's behind me, so I want to get that done and over with. My seat belt is properly mounted, click, and secured. It's not cut, torn, or frayed. It's adjusted to me. Detaches properly. I get it off, I get it away from me. It's behind me, so I want done with that. Now, sir, I'm going to perform a safe start. My gauge is already swept while you and I were checking the external lights. Spring brake valves are pulled out. Vehicle is in neutral. Boom, fired up. As soon as I fire it up, I go right to my gauges. As soon as I'm done with my gauges, I go right to my heater and defrost. The reason I do those two first is because there's two things on the truck that'll help you to fail. One involves points, and one involves flat out pass or fail, the air brake test. Okay? There's a safety mechanism that to me and you is a glitch when it comes to the test, and I'll show you that when we get to it. The one that involves points involves the engine being programmed to automatically shut off on you. If you don't have any interaction with the accelerator or the brake after so many minutes, the engine shuts off. That's why I hit the gauges and the heater and defrost first. Once I'm done with that, I can take my time calling out everything else on this truck. And if I'm the world's slowest talker and the engine shuts off, doesn't matter, because I never touched that key. The engine shut off, yeah, but I never touched that key. So, in other words, I still have electricity going on up here to be able to call out and get credit for anything up here that I need to call out. Make sense? So, I get my gauges and my heater and defrost. Now, I call out everything else up here that I got to call out. Now, sometime during the flow of me calling out my in-cab inspection, I'm going to hear it. What I'm doing is I'm killing two birds with one stone. I'm letting the engine run. I'm letting the engine run and build air into my tanks while I'm doing my in-cab inspection. And like I said, sometime in the flow, I'm going to hear it. Somewhere between my windshield and my windshield wipers, that's my flow. I'm going to hear it. My windshield is properly mounted and secure. It's not cracked, bent, or tss. Oh, that was my air governor cutout, sir. Did you hear it? Yep. And looking at my gauges, I'm at 120 to 140 psi. As I was saying, my windshield is probably, I go right back to where I was. What I just did was I just set the stage. I just satisfied that requirement of calling out my air governor cutout. Now all I got to do is call out all the rest of the stuff in the cab that I got to call out, and I'm ready to do it. My last call out's always up here. And in my overhead compartment, I have 6 spare fuses. And that said, I'm now ready to perform my air brake test. I already called out that my air governor cut out, and I am between 120 to 140 psi in my tank, so at this point I'm going to turn my engine off. I'm going to get out and chalk my wheels. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So you'll see me in action doing this. Now, when I'm testing my gauges, let me get this real life so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, when I'm testing my gauges, you got to have the engine on, right? I'm testing my water temperature gauge. I'm testing my oil pressure gauge. I'm testing my primary and secondary tank gauges. And I'm testing my battery gauge. To get to your battery gauge, you got a little plus sign on your steering wheel. Watch the center display and just keep pushing that plus sign until you see a little picture of a battery. Oh crap, this thing's messed up. keep pushing the plus sign until you see a little picture of the bat right there. As soon as you see the picture, call it out. My battery gauge is working properly. It's showing that my alternator's charging my batteries at 14.2 volts in this case. It'll read anywhere from like 13.8 to 14.2, 14.0, whatever. Whatever it reads, just call it out. As soon as I'm done with my gauges, right to my heater and defrost, right? Turn the fan all the way up. Turn the temperature all the way to hot. Turn this directional dial 2 notches from the far right. 2 notches from the far right blows it up and down at the same time. Stick your hand down till you feel it. Stick your hand up till you feel it. Then call it out. My heater and defroster are both working properly. Okay. Now, when I'm doing my windshield wipers, the way I do it is I call them out first, and then I show that they're working. To show that they're working, take your blinker switch and push in on it like I'm pushing it right through my steering column. It makes them work and the fluid come out at the same time. That way you don't have to fight with it trying to figure out how to get that stupid fluid coming out. Just push on it, okay? Now, when I'm doing the very first thing I'm going to do before anything, as soon as I get done with section whatever, all right, now I do section whatever and the coupling, right? You ready to do your in cab now? Yes, sir. Okay, first thing I want you to do is the external light check. So you go through that external light check. Now, he walks around, he gets in. Lights are good? Lights are good. Okay, I'm going to begin my in-cab inspection. Sometime during the flow of you doing your in-cab inspection, you have to do your lights again. But now you're not checking your external lights. Now you're checking your indicator lights. Okay? So, the way to do that, if you all can see this or not, when I'm doing my external light check, very first thing, the guy's standing out there, I'm in here. Alright, marker lights. That was my ear governor cut out. Alright, let me try this again. Alright, he's looking at me, I'm looking at him. My marker lights, thumbs up. Headlights, thumbs up. Push down on the blinker. High beams, thumbs up, right? Left, right, flashers, right? Now, when you're doing your indicator lights, the only lights that you're checking are your high beams, your left and right turn signal, and your flashers. You're just checking the little indicator lights that blink up here. Alright? So this time, pull up on your blinker switch. Your little blue light comes on, that's your high beams. As soon as I let go, it goes back off. Now to go the other way, you gotta have your lights on. Okay, this way you just pull up on it, the high beams come on. So this is what it looks like. Alright, sir, now I'm going to check my indicator lights. My high beams, my left turn signal, my right turn signal, and my flashers. All my indicator lights are working properly. Make sense? Now, if you were to go back to the inspector's version of the paperwork, it says either in my overhead compartment or my glove box, I have 6 spare fuses. That sounds stupid to me. I know damn well where those suckers are. They're right here. Because I use that strategy and calling them out. In my overhead compartment, I got 6 spare fuses. Because I use that strategy, as I'm doing my sweep, going left to right, once I get to this point, once I get to my heater and defrost, there's nothing at all over there that I have to call out, except for that side mirror. And I get that when I say both of my mirrors are properly mounted here, I call them out as both. So as I'm doing my sweep, once I get to this point here, there's nothing else up here I got to call out. Brings me to the back. In my back utility bin, now you all saw me before lunch where I popped that little pull switch that says baggage and a little side bin pops open. That's what I'm talking about. When I'm looking at you, the inspector, and I say, back in my utility bin, see what just happened? That's what I was talking about. That's why the very first thing I hit is my gauges and heater and defrost. The engine will shut off on you. So right now it doesn't matter. I still have current going through here. Call this stuff out if I needed to. Okay? Now, going back in my utility bin, you guys all saw it, right? You got the 10 BC fire extinguisher, the 3 emergency triangles. As soon as I call those out, that's my last call out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, two more things I'm going to show you. All right. Now I'm going to be talking about the last two tests with the engine on. I'm going to talk first about the service brakes test. Let me back up a little bit just to throw this out and make sure that everybody understands. Every test that you do when it comes to the air brake test, every step that you do, you got to tell them what you're going to do, then you do it. Then make sure you take enough time to tell them the result. Don't make the mistake of sliding right into the next test without telling them what happened. Whatever I just did is working properly. You got to tell them that, okay? Don't say whatever I just did, but be explanative of what you just did. On the fourth and fifth steps, there's a part of this engine, not a part of this engine, a part of the onboard computer that will mess you up. And this being an automatic, the onboard computer, those sensors dictate whether or not this truck is in a safe mode. And if it doesn't like what it sees, it will not treat you friendly. Okay, what I'm talking about. See that big old N in the middle of my dash right there? Watch what happens when I throw this thing in gear. This is my shifter. This is my shifter. You got drive, neutral, reverse. This thing, this truck, as an automatic, automatically knows what gear it wants to throw you in. It has a brain of its own. It registers the incline, decline, the weight, the load, all that, and it knows what gear to throw you in. Okay? Now, watch what happens when I throw this thing in drive. See that little flashing D? That little flashing D in the corner? Nothing. That's the truck telling me, I see you want to go and drive, but I'm not going to drive because you're not safe. It wants my foot on the brake. It wants my, just like a car anymore, it wants my foot on the brake before it goes into gear. But watch what happens. Now, I'm going to put my foot on the brake and it's going to go into gear. Now, when this thing goes into a 1, 2, or 3, you're in first, second, or third. But watch what happens. Let's say I'm at the tail end of my tug test. I got my trailer spring brake valve pushed in to test my tractor brakes. Now I'm putting my foot on the brake. Bam, I just went into second. But now I'm sitting here for a couple seconds trying to remember, what am I supposed to do next? Thing just beeped at me. But I put you in gear, but now until you figure out what you're going to do next, I'm throwing your butt right back in neutral. That's what messes students up. What happens is either the student didn't get it into gear to begin with, or they had it in gear, they got it into gear, but they waited a couple seconds too long, and the thing threw you right back in neutral. What's happening in reality is the truck is confused, because with this tractor and trailer hooked up, and you got the air supply feeding back there, you got one pushed in and one pulled out. The truck's looking at you like, what are you doing? This isn't right. No, I'm throwing it back in neutral. If you have them both pushed in other words, you're sitting at a real long light or waiting for a freight train to go by or something, and you're sitting here and drive, these both pushed in, it's not going to throw you back in neutral because it registers that you're in a driving mode. But when you have one pushed in and one pulled out, it's confusing it. It's making it think, what is this guy doing? No, I'm putting it back in neutral until he figures it out.
It's a smart truck.
Right. So, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now the last thing, the rule of thumb, this is where I keep telling everybody, you've got to keep coming down here and practicing, because it's just a matter of getting that flow. Put it in, foot on the brake, put it in gear. As soon as it changes from neutral to a 1, 2, or 3, get off the brake. Right on the accelerator. Tug, tug. Okay? Make sense? It's just step by step by step without hesitation. Now, on the fourth and fifth steps, when you're done with each step, pull the spring brake valve out first. Put it back in neutral. Then look at the guy and tell him the result. What you're doing is you're putting the truck back into a safe mode before you take your eyes off of it and tell him what the result is. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you before I go through this test, as if I'm a student testing, I'm going to show you the service brakes test first. I'm going to push in both of my spring brake valves. I'm going to roll forward a few feet and use my service brakes to stop the vehicle. I push them in. I throw it in gear. I roll forward a few feet. I use my service brakes to gently come to a stop so you don't throw the guy through the windshield. Once you stop, just pull the tractor spring brake valve. just pull the yellow one. As soon as you pull this yellow one, you're going to see them both pop out. And back in neutral. Alright, I've just confirmed my service brakes are working properly. Make sense?
Yes.
Then you get one final call out and you're done. Now, the reason I showed you that one first is because now I'm going to show you the tug test. The way that I do the tug test now, after I had myself tested a couple weeks ago, I saw a little trick that the inspector did, and I liked it because it's less steps, less stuff you got to say, and less chances for a mistake. But there's a little trick with your fingers. It's not a, significant thing, but it's a little trick. So watch this. I'll do it a couple times. It's a little confusing, tongue twisting as far as the logic of what you're doing. But when I push this one in, I just release these brakes. This one's still being out. These brakes are still locked up, right? So, and then flip it around. I'm going to push this one in and test these. So, this is the call out. Alright, sir, now I'm going to perform a tug test. Hang on, everyone. Now, sir, I'm going to perform a tug test. I'm going to push in my tractor spring brake valve to test my trailer brakes. Then, I'm going to push in my trailer spring brake valve to test my tractor brakes. Foot on the brake. As soon as it goes in gear, get off the brake. Tug, tug. Now watch. I'm going to push the red one in. I'm going to hold it with my thumb while I pull this one out.
Oh, this will come out. Okay.
Pull it out. Back in neutral. Alright, I've just confirmed that my tractor and trailer brakes are working properly. See how I did that?
Yes.
What I used to do, until I had myself tested, what I used to do is I used to do them one at a time. I'm going to push in my tractor spring brake valve to test my trailer brakes. Foot on the brake, throw it in gear. Tug, tug. Pull it out, back in neutral. Alright, I've just confirmed my trailer brakes are working properly. Now I just reversed it. Do the opposite one. What I'm doing now is I'm calling the whole test out in one shot. And then I'm doing it all in one shot. Now, once I get this thing in gear, and I get off the brake and I go right on the accelerator, my foot's never leaving that accelerator until I'm done with this test. So, as soon as I get this thing in gear and I go tug, tug, my foot's right there. Push that in, hold it, pull this one out, tug, tug. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions on that?
So is that right for us telling we're going to do both simultaneously?
Yeah. I wanna start a fresh recording.
My tractor spring brake valve to test my trailer brakes. Then I'm going to push in my trailer spring brake valve to test my tractor brakes. Put on the brake. As soon as it goes into gear, get off the brake. Tug, tug. Now my foot never moves. Push this one in. Hold it while I pull this one out. Tug, tug. Pull it out. Back in neutral. Alright, I've just confirmed that my tractor and trailer brakes are both working properly.
Right. So you have like a slight tilt on it. You're not like pushing it to the floor.
No, just a little tap.
Okay.
That's something that some students do. They're not sure how to hit it, and you always want to have your heel on the ground. If you have your heel on the ground, you got control. If you try to do it with your heel up here, you're going to be trying to pull that thing into a somersault.
So use your toe, basically.
Yeah, I use my whole foot, the ball of my foot, just like that. Just little taps on the accelerator, as long as you're tugging against it. What happens is, going back to what happens when it either doesn't go into drive initially or it does, but it throws you back in neutral, the student will go, yeah, boom, boom. I just confirmed that my tractor brakes are working. Yeah, you just confirmed that you failed. Because what happened is your transmission threw you back out of gear. You're in neutral. And now you rev the engine and the torque of the engine rocks the truck a little bit. Yeah, I felt something. It's working. No, you were in neutral the whole time. You weren't engaged where your transmission was really pulling against your brakes to make sure they're working right. Make sense?
Yes.
Any questions before I start? Everybody's good? All right. I'm going to fan my brakes down to below 100 like they're going to be on test day. I'm going to let... Sorry?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to let my secondary catch up with my primary for a second. All right, close enough. Now, everything I'm about to do, if you follow this to the T on test day, there's no way you can't pass. Okay? Now, here's the scenario. One last thing I need to throw out before I start. Between the third step and the fourth step, between the spring brake valves popping out and you doing the tug test, you've got to get out, get your chocks, jump back in, and now you're going to perform a safe start to build air all the way back up to air governor cutout before you're ready to start with your tug test, right? Mm-hmm. That window of time is what I call the point of uncomfortable silence. You're sitting over here in the driver's seat and they're over there with the clipboard and you're like, oh, man, what's that dude writing about me? I know I'm screwing up. Instead of worrying about all that, this is the time to think. Think. What did I forget? What did I forget? Anything up to this point in the cab and outside. It's not over until it's over. So in other words, until that very last fifth service brake test where you make your final call out, it's free game. Let's say I had section D, whole truck. I missed 31 parts. I can only miss 30. In her mind, or his mind, I already failed. They're still going to have you do the in-cab and the air brake test. And then at the end, they're going to come back and say, oh, you did pretty good on the in-cab and you nailed it on the air brake test, but pointed out, man, you didn't get enough points. In other words, I failed. Now I got to come back in 2 days and do all this stuff again. Because of that, it's not over until it's over. If there's anything at all that you think you might have forgot, I'm going through every component in this truck. Every component on section A, B, C, back doors, everything. I'm going through everything at all. Anything that you think you might have forgot, throw it out. They're going to do one of two things. They're going to look at their clipboard, silently do this. Yeah, that means you just got it. Or they might say something like, okay, as soon as we're done with the in-cab and the air brake test, I want you to show me. All you got to do is get out there and show them. That's what I was talking about. Okay, you got it. You know what I mean? So that's the time to think. I'll give you an example of that. All right, so here's the scenario. You're my inspector. Okay? So I got a favor to ask. Ma'am, you're my inspector. So I got a job for you. When I say, will you time me? Say yes.
Okay.
And then when I do this, say, all right, we'll call that a minute.
Okay.
Okay? Scenario is I had section D, and I'm all the way back in the back of the truck with her, and she's my inspector, and I'm calling out the very last of my components. All right, ma'am, and I've got DOT reflective tape covering 100% of my DOT bumper. It's red and white in color, it's clean, and it's not ripped or torn. And that said, I would now do the same thing all the way down the passenger side of my rig. And that said, I'm now ready to perform my in-cab inspection. You're going to say, all right, first thing I want you to do is external light check. Well, can I get your help? While I work the controls in the truck, can you walk around this truck and make sure all the lights are working for me one by one as I work the controls? Just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Okay. All right, the lights I want to check, now you and I are in the back, right? Mm-hmm. So the lights I want to check back here, ma'am, are all my clearance lights and my tail lights, including my running lights, my brake lights, my blinkers and flashers. Then on both sides of my trailer, I'm going to walk up where I showed you just before lunch, right in front of the landing gear. On both sides of my trailer, I want to check all my clearance lights. I want to check my marker signal flasher lights. And then under my tractor, so I'm really pointing back there, right? Mm-hmm. Under my tractor, I want to check my tail lights, including my brake lights, my running lights, my blinkers, and my flashers. Then I'm going to walk you up in front of the truck. I'm going to say in the front of the truck, ma'am, I want to check all my clearance lights, my headlights, my high beams, and my marker signal flashers. Okay, so you're up there. I'm walking around, I get in. I turn my key to the on position, let my gauges sweep. But I'm talking to myself because you're out there. Okay, you're looking at me, I'm looking at you. Marker lights. You're checking my clearance lights, marker lights, thumbs up. Headlights, thumbs up. High beams, thumbs up. I turn them all off. Left blinker, thumbs up. Right blinker, thumbs up. Flashers, thumbs up. Now you're walking around the back. As you're walking around the back, I'm adjusting my mirrors. Okay, now you're all the way in the back. You're looking at me in the side mirror. I'm looking at you. Markers. Thumbs up. Turn them off. Left blinker. Thumbs up. Right blinker. Thumbs up. Flashers. Thumbs up. Because you're back there, brakes. Thumbs up. All right, now you're walking around to get in. You just got in. Lights are good?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to begin my in-cab inspection. My seat belt is properly mounted and secured. It's not cut, torn, or frayed. It's adjusted to me and detaches properly. Now, ma'am, I'm going to perform a safe start. My gauge is already swept while you and I were checking the external lights. Spring brake valves are pulled out. Vehicle is in neutral. Now I'm going to continue my in-cab inspection. My water temperature gauge is working properly. It's rising to the proper operating temperature. My oil pressure gauge is working properly. It's rising to the proper PSI level. My primary and secondary tank gauges are working properly. My needles are climbing as it's reaching towards its 120 to 140 air diameter cutout. My battery gauge. Whoops, just passed it. My battery gauge is working properly. It's showing that my alternator's charging my batteries at 14.1 volts. Now I'm going to check my heater and defrost. All the way up, all the way to hot, 2 notches to the far right. Stick your hand down, stick your hand up. Alright, my heater and defrost are both working properly. My side mirrors are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. They're clean, they're free of anything that would obstruct my view, and they're adjusted to me. My windshield is properly mounted and secure, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. It's clean and it's free of anything that would obstruct my view. My weather stripping around my windshield is properly mounted and secure, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or freeze, and it's not leaking. My windshield wipers are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. My wiper blades are secured against my windshield. There's no abrasions, bubbles, cuts, dry rot, or frays. My windshield wipers and the fluid are both working properly. Now this is where I start doing my mental sweep. That was my air governor cutout, ma'am. Did you hear it? And looking at my gauges, I am at 120 to 140 PSI. Now, this is me thinking out loud. This is how I do my mental sweep, okay? Alright, got my side mirrors. I'm just thinking out loud. I got my side mirrors. I got my gauges. I got my battery gauge. Now, ma'am, I'm going to check my indicator lights. My high beams, my left blinker, my right blinker, and my flashers. All my indicator lights are working properly. Another sweep. Side mirrors, gauges, battery gauge, indicator lights now. My city horn and air horn are both working properly. Another sweep. Side mirrors, gauges, battery gauge, indicator lights now, city horn, air horn, windshield, weather stripping, windshield wipers, wiper blades. Heater and defrost. Brings me to the back. In my back utility bin, I have a 10 VC fire extinguisher. It's properly mounted and secure, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. It's fully charged, it's up to date, and the pin's in place. I also have 3 emergency triangles in that bin. They're amber and red in color. They're properly mounted and secured, not cracked, bent, or broken, not missing any hardware. In my overhead compartment, I've got 6 spare fuses. And that's it, I'm now ready to perform my air brake test. I already called out that my air governor cut out, and I am between 120 to 140 psi in my tank, so at this point, I'm going to turn my engine off. I'm going to get out and chock my wheels. So I'm going to get out using my 3 points of contact. Pop the side bin, and I'm going to close the door, so I'll be right back.
Oh.
Yes, if you're facing this way, you put it in the back of the wheel. If you're facing down, put it in front of you. If you're lucky, you have to.
All right, ma'am. My wheels are chocked. I'm going to turn my key to the on position. I'm going to let my gauges sweep. Now watch my leg. Watch what I do with my leg. Watch more specifically my foot. All right, ma'am, my gauges have swept. I'm going to roll down both of my windows so I can listen for air leaks as I perform these steps. My first step is a 4 psi air loss. I'm going to push in both of my spring brake valves, and once the air settles, I'm going to press and hold my service brake, and I'm going to count to a minute. And in 1 minute's time, in a combination vehicle, I should not lose more than 4 psi. Will you time me? Okay? See what I do with my foot? As far back away from that brake pedal as I can get it. I'm just watching that top gauge. When that top gauge stops moving, I'm going to call it out. Alright, ma'am, my system is settled. My gauge has stopped moving. I'm going to begin my test. 1, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006, 1000. Alright? In watching my gauges, I've just confirmed that in 1 minute's time, in a combination vehicle, I did not lose more than 4 psi. Everybody good?
Yes.
Now I'm going to fan my brakes down to about 60 psi, at which time my low air indicator light and buzzer should come on. Alright, my low air indicator light and buzzer came on. They're working properly. Now I'm going to continue to fan my brakes down to between 20 to 40 psi, at which time both of my spring brake valves should pop out. Now at this point, I'm looking right here. Watch to make sure they both pop out. Don't stop fanning until they both pop out. Alright, both of my spring brake valves popped out. I am between 20 to 40 psi. They're working properly. Now I'm going to turn my ignition off. I'm going to get out and remove my chocks. And I actually did chock the wheel, so I'm going to actually remove it.
When they pop out, you pop out.
Right. When they pop out, you pop out.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
It's getting colder.
Alright, my chocks are removed. I'm going to turn my key to the on position and let my gauges sweep so I can perform a safe start.
And you have to start it again because now you don't have air in the
Exactly. I've just dragged all the air out of my tanks on those first 3 steps. Alright, my gauges have swept. Spring brake valves are pulled out. Vehicle is in neutral. Now, one thing you all haven't seen yet. Now, ma'am, I'm going to increase my engine RPMs to about 12 to 1400 to assist my air compressor in pushing air into my tanks. When you do this, just find that sweet spot with your accelerator and just hold it there. In other words, they don't want to hear you going run, run, run. Just find that one spot. Okay? Now, you all hear that buzzer going off, right? Mm-hmm. This is the time I was talking about. Think, think, think. What did I forget? What did I forget? I'm thinking about everything. I'll give you an example in a minute. just means I'm past 60. I'm only halfway there. I still got a whole lot of time. I got to sit here and think and do nothing. Oh yeah, by the way, ma'am, while I was checking the coupling section, I forgot to mention that my service and my emergency line hoses and my electric cable, they were all properly suspended above my catwalk and they weren't all tangled up. I'm thinking. Oh yeah, one more thing. The weather stripping around my back doors, they were properly mounted. Anything at all you think of, throw it out. Now, once I get to one notch past 100 or 120, right now I'm crawling just past 100. Once I get to that one notch past 100 or 120, now I'm going to stop thinking about what I forgot. Now I'm going to start thinking, what's next? Tug test. So I'm thinking about my hand movements, how to call it out, foot on the brake, throw it in gear. As soon as it goes in gear, get off the brake. I'm thinking about all this stuff. I'll even bump the windows down a little just to make sure I hear that air governor cut out. Alright, that was my air governor cutout, ma'am. Did you hear it? And looking at my gauges, I am at 120 to 140 psi. I'm going to continue my test. My next step is a tug test. I'm going to push in my tractor spring brake valve to test my trailer brakes. Then I'm going to push in my trailer spring brake valve to test my tractor brakes. Put on the brake, as soon as it goes in gear, get off the brake. Tug, tug. Push this one in, hold it while I pull this one out. Tug, tug. Alright, I've just confirmed that my tractor and trailer brakes are working properly. Now I'm going to perform a service brakes test. I'm going to push in both of my spring brake valves. I'm going to roll forward a few feet, and I'm going to use my service brakes to stop the vehicle. Put on the brake, same drill. As soon as it goes in gear, get off the brake. Now, look at what's happening. I got my foot on the accelerator, we're not moving. Watch what happens.
What's up on that?
Watch what's outside the truck. You see it? We're starting to crawl?
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay, put on the brake gently. Hold this. Back in neutral. Alright, I've just confirmed that my service brakes are working properly. I've also noted that my vehicle didn't shift to the left or to the right, which would have otherwise indicated possible brake problems, flat tire, or a broken suspension. That concludes my in-cab inspection and air brake test.
Do you say that before you kill the engine?
That's the very next thing. That's the very last thing. I'm not going to touch the engine because you're going to be up there on test day. So right then and there, he's probably going to say something like, "All right, ready to do your backing maneuvers?" That means you passed. You can ask him, "Hey, does that mean I passed?" "Yeah, you passed. You want to ready to do it?" But I mean that means you passed. If he says something like, "All right, now I want you to roll all the way down past that first set of cones until your trailer passes the first set of cones. I'll blow the whistle, stop, hit your city horn, throw it in reverse. Now I want you to go all the way straight back through that same set of cones until your front bumper passes the very first set of cones on the north end of that string of cones." That's your straight line. Stop, set your brakes, hit your air horn. That's your first maneuver. So that means obviously you passed. As soon as you see that truck rolling, all right, I'll get out of your way. He's looking at me weird. Now let me explain what just happened a second ago. And it's happening again. See, I'm starting to crawl. See the front of the hood? See, I'm starting to roll. Straighten this up a little bit. Let me explain that one. There's a very good chance and you all just witnessed it and heard it and felt it, there's a very good chance that right after your tug test, you're going to be right around 100 psi, maybe a little bit more. This thing obviously has a leak, but normal, perfect conditions, you're going to be somewhere around 100 psi. Now, you happen to be a fast talker. You say, now I'm going to do a service brakes test. I'm going to push both of my spring brake valves in. I'm going to roll forward a few feet and use my service brakes to stop the vehicle. Boom, boom, push them in. You go to hit the accelerator and it goes, doesn't move. It's because you didn't have enough air. Once you push those in, you're right about 100. Now you just dropped 2 or maybe even a little below 100. Now you got to hit the damn brake to get that thing in gear, right? Drops even more below 100. What happens is you didn't have enough pressure pumped out of your tanks to push those tandem brake linings loose from your brake drum, so they're still locked up back there. And you go to hit the accelerator, it goes, don't freak out. Don't punch it. You know, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to test one. I better stab it. No, because what will happen is exactly what just happened to us. Now, this thing's got a leak, so you heard what happened, but you see that I finally started to slowly crawl, and they got faster and faster and faster. But because of the leak, you heard what happens if you stab it. All of a sudden, with those tandems still locked back there, one or two things are going to happen. Either you're going to do a burnout all the way up here, because your tandem tires are locked, just go dragging all the way up there, or because your light back there in the trailer starts bouncing. And you guys heard it a little bit. It started to bounce. I saw Antonio's head go. He's like, whoa. That's what happens, because your light starts bouncing. And then you go all the way up. You don't want that to happen on test day. So if that happens, one of two things you can do. If you think about it, you're going to be like this on test day. So if you think about it, you can say, you know what, sir, I'm right about 100 psi. I'm going to wait about 5 or 10 seconds before I do this last step. I'm going to rev my engine for about 12, 15 seconds, build up a little more air. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
But if you don't think of it, you go right from the tug test, and now I'm going to perform a service brakes test, and you push them in, and that thing goes like that. Just hold a little bit of pressure on the accelerator. And those trucks up there are roadworthy. They're not training trucks down here that continuously have to have stuff fixed on them, so they'll be roadworthy. Okay.
So in that case, just keep a light pressure until it starts to move.
Hold a little bit of pressure on your accelerator, and as the compressor's continuously pumping air back there, right? As soon as it pumps enough air pressure back there, it'll start pushing those springs back, and it'll start releasing the drum. The air also slowly, you'll start to crawl. Then it'll go faster and faster, and all of a sudden, there's the full release. Now you got to get off the accelerator, otherwise you're flying all the way up the parking lot. Make sense?
Yes.
Any questions?